Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Sherloc's Roundtable. My name is R.C. Williams.
And I'm Juliana Armand.
And this is your look at what's happening in the world ripped from the headlines. So Juliana and I, we do our investigative work for you, and occasionally we have incredible guests on.
Yep.
I will say this, our last podcast episode with Todd Callender, the attorney, was nothing short of amazing.
Yep.
And we managed to get banned from YouTube. High five.
Right? Seriously.
That thing was down in less than a day. If you have not seen that episode of Sherlock's Roundtable, Todd Callender is a champion for the vaccine injured and is doing a lot of work there. It's certainly worth watching. If you go to our Rumble channel, just go to rumble.com, look for Ask Sherlock, and you'll see that episode. There are a lot of comments, and we actually, by demand, we had the documents that Todd was talking about in the episode, and we actually linked those recently. So all the information that you need for that is there.
Awesome.
Yeah, Juliana, I think our train of incredible guests continues. So Diego Rodriguez is going to be up in just a minute here from Freedom Man Press. We met him last week at an Americans for Prosperity meeting. They do an event called Torchbearer Tuesday, where they have people come in and discuss issues of the day. And Diego and his family came in and they shared the story of Baby Cyrus. You may have heard about this in the news. In essence, this is what happens when the state gets way too involved in family business.
And I personally take it, very personal what happened to Baby Cyrus, because CPS came after me. Fortunately, they closed the case, but it very easily could have been me that would have been in the situation. And I would not have had the power that Diego had.
Absolutely. And so we got the story of Baby Cyrus, but Diego also really helped us to understand something that's underlying that is just the worst of the worst. It's literally government-sponsored child trafficking.
Literally.
Through Child Protective Services. There's so much wrong with even making that statement. I mean, we need to make it for the sake of the podcast, but just the fact that we had to do it, and Diego spent all of this time putting together this incredible presentation that he'll share more with us in a minute, but he tells this story of exactly how the government works. And we can tell you this in advance. No state is innocent in this. They're all on the take. And we're based in Florida. Florida is one of the chief offenders. We have an incredible governor. We had no idea. And it's not really his fault. I don't think he knows.
Right.
And so with podcasts like this one, we're going to help him. So Diego Rodriguez is the founder of Freedom Man Press. It's a pro-government organization at the very highest level. Diego and his family recently moved to the free state of Florida from Idaho, where they were fighting this battle. And we're blessed to have him to be a Floridian. So let's go ahead and get the one and only Diego Rodriguez onto Sherlock's Roundtable. Hey, buddy.
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me on the show. We appreciate you guys being here with me, or vice versa, letting me be on.
Yeah, it's so great to see you again, man. You heard us in the preamble to the show today, but we've been talking to friends and family since we saw you guys last about this, and we continue to be amazed how few people have any idea on what's going on here. They maybe have heard the story about Baby Cyrus, but the part about the CPS and what the government is doing, they had absolutely no idea. And that night, you opened the eyes of well over 50 people in that audience, Diego, and that's why I said to you right away, we've got to have you on the show as soon as possible. So we're so glad you're with us. Let's do this. Please give us some background on you and what you're doing with Freedom Man Press, and then let's get to the case of Baby Cyrus and what's happening with the government.
Sure. Well, again, thanks, guys, for having me on. We really appreciate it. My name is Diego Rodriguez. I'm from Freedom Man Press, and we have our organization, which we started there in Idaho years ago when we moved. Probably back in 2012, we got it started. And basically, the whole concept of the Freedom Man Press is to do two major things. Number one is to educate the public about issues of freedom. And number two is to expose all levels of corruption in government and everywhere. If somebody is corrupt and their corruption is harming freedom, which pretty much all corruption does damage to freedom, then we're here to expose you. And it's what we did there in Idaho for a little over a decade. And now we've moved here to Florida. We're going to continue to do the same thing, not just here in Florida, but all over the country and everywhere we find it. And so obviously that puts us in the crosshairs with people in power who have something to hide. And you know, you can go to our blog, you'll find that we are very pro-government. And what I mean by being pro-government is, I mean the institution of government is literally ordained by God. I'm a Christian man. I was a former pastor for almost a decade in a Pentecostal church. And so we base everything we do based on the word of God, based on the Bible. And I can tell you very clearly that the institution of government, civil government, just like the institution of the church, just like the institution of the family, these are all institutions ordained by God. So we are 100% as pro-government as we are pro-family, as we are pro-church, because all three are institutions ordained by God. However, just like a family can become manipulative and abusive and tyrannical, then I am therefore opposed to those who are destroying the institution of the family while they are members of a family. Just like a church can become abusive and tyrannical, I am opposed to that individual church that becomes that way, and I will work to expose those leaders who have crossed their God-given boundaries and have now become tyrants and enemies of God's word. And likewise, I am opposed to any government institution or government bad actors who have gone beyond their God-ordained, biblically ordained boundaries, have now become abusive and tyrannical. And unfortunately, basically the only context in which the typical modern day American knows government is a tyrannical one. We don't have a picture of a biblically bound and restrained government pretty much anywhere in modern American context. And so people don't really understand what that means. So if somebody opposes something that a member of government who's gone beyond their realm has gone, they just think that you're anti-government. And that is just a foolish, ignorant statement by people who have been, you know, educated by the government and they know no better.
Wow. I was on last night. There's a local radio show here, and I filled in the second hour because there was an event last night. And this came up. And Diego, I said, I was along those same lines, is really who watches the watchers?
Exactly.
And Freedom and Press, what a perfect name, right? You guys have taken on that load to make sure that if it's out of order, it is returned to order, because God is a God of order.
That's right.
And that there are watchers on the wall.
Yep.
Really.
So
I would say one of the things that most frustrates me about the government institutions is that the government institutions back each other up like nobody else does. So, for example, if there is a man who is abusing his child, all fathers around the country I know will stand up and denounce the child abuser. That is wrong. We shouldn't have that. If we have a pastor of a church who falls into sin and commits adultery or robs the church or does something and he has a terrible scandal, all other churches will get up and say, that man is wrong. Down with that guy. Shame on him for doing that. He should be ashamed of himself. But if you have a police officer who abuses somebody or kills somebody, all the rest of the cops say, hey, hold on now. There's two sides of the story. We got to protect this man. And hey, he's one of us. And government institutions protect one another. They never denounce one another. And that is not only as shameful as it is scary, because it means that there's very little justice when it comes to the tyrants who are ruling over us in government.
So what I've seen, my pastor keeps talking about the levels of institutions. You got your personhood, you've got your family, you've got your church, and then you've got your civil government. Exactly what you were talking about, Diego.
Yeah.
And
those are the four spheres of government. So you've got a good pastor if he's teaching you that.
Yes, sir, he is. And his question always is, what part of your life is Jesus not Lord over? So I want to say to all the pastors, why are they not talking about what's happening with our civil government? Why are they not really talking about what's happening to your personhood because of all the propaganda and stuff that's happening? They're not talking about this government as being tyrannical the way that you're talking about it. And we just need to, as a church, step out and say, you know what? We were founded on the Bible. The Bible was quoted more times in our Constitution by our founding fathers than any other source ever. And they came here specifically for our freedoms, right? And we don't realize that we don't have those freedoms anymore. Now when CPS can show up and just go, you know what? The baby, he's mine. No.
That's right.
Yeah. Diego, we talked about this a bit when we saw you. You know, we're working on an expose on a cryptocurrency case that's a bellwether. And the gentleman that the government is after, exactly what you said, after going through thousands of pages of documents and evidence and seeing how the agencies colluded to suppress information, there are exonerating witnesses and exonerating evidence, much like the case with Baby Cyrus, that has not seen the light of day yet, and is going to take an inordinate amount of time, money, and effort for this person to win their freedom. And it's like, we're seeing that too. So few people understand how these agencies work in tandem and instantly say, even if they're wrong, oh, wait a minute, time out, we got to do this first. There has to be an investigation before we do anything.
Meanwhile, you're investigating the guilty.
Correct.
So just to take that a step further so people understand the lack of justice in what we've all been propagandized to believe is the land of the free and the home of the brave. Let's just take this case. I mean, we've got volumes and volumes on our website, lists and lists of links and stories of government abuse from, you know, every angle you want to look at it. There's an entire section called issues where we cover all those issues, from abortion to the war on cash and the financial destruction we have in our country, to police abuse, to the right to bear arms, to religious freedom. All of it's there on our website so people can see that. And so I'm just going to use right now this case, since we're talking about Baby Cyrus. And for those who know the story of Baby Cyrus, on the back end of it, as we went out to fight to get him back, because they did kidnap my grandson. He was being held in a hospital like they typically hold him, and we were protesting out in front of that hospital on a daily basis. Well, that hospital, St. Luke's Hospital, there in Idaho, in Boise, Idaho, is suing me now. They are now suing me for defamation. And just so everybody understands how defamation, which should be a First Amendment right, but it's a serious allegation. Alex Jones just got, awarded against him nearly $1 billion lawsuit. If it wasn't so serious, it would be comical, right? Seriously, $1 billion lawsuit because he simply questioned whether or not something in the news was real. And, the story was the Sandy Hook shooting. We understand it was real. Even he understands it was real. But when it first happened, he's like, I don't know if this is real. Maybe these are probably crisis actors. And it's just a guy who's got a microphone and he's out there questioning it. And because he questioned that, now he has to pay $1 billion. I mean, $1 billion, literally $1 billion. I mean, it's just completely insane. And so that's what they're trying to do to me. They're trying to hit me with a defamation lawsuit. And we know for a fact that they're doing so in order to shut my mouth and to terrify anybody else from ever fighting back against them. Now, just so you understand how there's no justice in these situations, we have friends who are lawyers who came to our assistance and went to fight the Baby Cyrus case, and were very effective in helping us on the legal side to fight the Baby Cyrus case. For this case as well, we were looking to, okay, can you guys help me fight this case? And we were going to try to start a GoFundMe account so that the money would go directly to the legal team, etc. And these are not only good lawyers and people who want to make money as a legal team, but they're personal family friends. So these are people who love us and we love them, and they're literally like family to us. And they literally told me, Diego, we can't take this case. And I said, okay, why not? They said, we can't take this case because it will break us. So we would have to hire 5 to 6 attorneys, literally, just to fight this case, and it would take every waking hour of our time for the better part of probably 2 to 3 years. The case itself will take a year, and then knowing that we don't have a sane system in Idaho and that you're probably going to lose the case, we'll have to fight it on appeal. That'll take another 2 to 3 years. And so even if we charged you $250,000, which we just couldn't take that money from you as our friend, it still wouldn't be enough for us to be able to fund our legal team and take 100% of all of our time, meaning we wouldn't have time for bread and butter in the regular world, and it would basically shut down our law firm. And so that is the way this works in the real world. So I can't even get legal support, even if I had money, because people wouldn't be willing to take the case because it would just absorb 100% of their bandwidth. So now I'm fighting the largest and most corrupt legal firm in the state of Idaho, who, by the way, is the same law firm who works personally for the governor of the state of Idaho, who is the same law firm who actually is the law firm for the state of Idaho as a whole. and who is the law firm who is behind all of the legal opinions that gave the state of Idaho the legal justification for COVID lockdowns for 2 years. It's also the same law firm that is sponsoring with their own money the gay pride pro-LGBTQ plus agenda in Idaho, including sponsoring the most recent Boise Gay Pride event, where they had a children's drag show event that they sponsored. And so this is actually, depending upon how you interpret the law, illegal. But the law firm is sponsoring this. It's not me saying it. We have the proof and documentation. That's all public evidence that they're doing so. And these are the guys I now have to fight pro se. Pro se meaning I don't have a lawyer. I have to do this all by myself.
So they're using basically our tax money to go against you.
Exactly right. And they are defending a government subsidized hospital. Right, so you got these large allopathic hospitals in all the big cities, and that's what this one is as well. So they're a nonprofit group, so they don't pay taxes, but they get the vast majority of their revenue from Medicaid, Medicare, et cetera, and they're government subsidized. In the last 2 years, the vast majority of all the revenue, which was over $100,000 per hospital bed, came from COVID money. So they got money from COVID. They made millions and millions of dollars. We have evidence that shows that their CEO made $18 million during the 2 years of COVID, where previously their CEO had never made more than $900,000. And of course, they were getting paid for killing people on ventilators, or getting paid on and on and on. We can go down the line. You get it. My point is, I'm just one story. Compound that story hundreds of thousands of times across America, and everybody just gets shut down. It's like you guys were describing before. You put something on, and I watched that interview, by the way, with that lawyer that you had, and it was absolutely incredible. There was information there I'd never heard before, and I stay pretty well in touch with what's going on for the whole COVID scam. I'd never seen that particular fellow before. The things he had to say were incredible. The evidence he had to declare was incredible, and so you guys put that on YouTube. What happened? They shut it down. It got taken off immediately. And so guess what? Whether it's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all the major avenues where people are connected to, where they think they're getting information from, if you have something to say that's counter narrative, they shut you down. If that's happening in terms of the press, if that's happening in terms of public information, imagine what's going on in the courtroom across America. Mm-hmm. Everybody who has an actual legitimate case where they have been, their rights have been violated, they don't have the means to fight. So just like universally, people who have truth to share and declare, they're shut down in all popular media outlets. People whose rights have been violated in the court system universally are shut down. And so they just take, they walk away. They don't fight back. They take plea deals, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And so just nationwide, mm-hmm. these issues are never publicized, and there is no justice.
So we as a nation of people were very fragmented. But when it comes to children, you know, we can all come together, because there's not a single parent. I don't care if you're in government, out government, part of the political system, Democrat, Republican, it does not matter. When you start messing with our children, you know, we went on this, you know, everything that we've done is because one day a woman looked at me and she said, there's 3 homeless shelters and they're asking me how to work better together. And I said, what? She goes, right here in Seminole County. And I'm like, what? She goes, we have 1,700 homeless teenagers. And I'm like, what? Like, I just kept going, what? I mean, like, this is the United States of America. How could it be okay that in one county we have 1,700 homeless children? I'm sorry. This is crimes against humanity. I can't sit back and just allow this to happen. You know, Baby Cyrus and everything that he went through, what your family went through and everything. Thank God you got him back. But what a great story to be able to say, you know what? We the people need to start talking about what's happening. You know,
so I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about children, because what we're seeing all across America is, for example, let's just talk about the LGBTQ plus, because that's how they want you to say it, movement. People, you know, it was just a decade ago where we still didn't even we still didn't accept here in this country gay marriage. And now not only is gay marriage, you know, standardized everywhere, but now if you even, you know, call somebody by the wrong pronoun, it's being considered, you know, discrimination and hate speech. And, you know, you could actually be sued and go to jail for just calling someone him or his when she wants to be called a her or a they or some stupid like that. That's how far we've come in just a decade. But What's happened now is that whole movement has gone to their perverse end, which is showing that they want to groom children, and they want these children to become bisexual. They want them to have sex changes. They want them to do drag shows. They want them to, these 10, 11, 12-year-old kids and younger involved in drag shows and all types of weird, perverse nonsense. And that is now all of a sudden people who for 10 years have said, okay, we got to let all this go on because I don't want to get anybody mad at me. And now people go, wait a minute. How do we get here? That we've come too far. When people are seeing, people are showing up at these school board meetings because they got pornography that they're teaching literally and showing to the kids in their schools. And it's not just conservative. So what you said is 100% right. I think they've played their hand too hard and too far, and they've gone too far. And what we saw with the case of Baby Cyrus was people who hate me, because I have people who hated me there in Idaho, came and stood with us, and they said, we don't like you, we don't like Freedom Man, we don't like what you stand for, we don't like who your friends are, but this is too far and this is wrong. And if they could do this to you, they can do it to me. And the CPS kidnapping issue is a nonpartisan issue. They'll kidnap a liberal child as soon as they do a conservative one. Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter. They're kidnapping everybody for profit. So this is a nonpartisan issue, and it is bringing people together in remarkable ways once they are aware of what's going on.
So Diego, let's dig into it then. Let's talk about what happened to Baby Cyrus and tie it into CPS. Let's lay it out for everybody now.
Okay, so what I want to do here, just like we did there at our meeting there last week, is let me share with your audience very quickly the history behind what's going on with CPS and the truth of it, because as Baby Cyrus was kidnapped, I did over 50 plus interviews. We were everywhere from local to national and even a handful of international shows. And what I found was, if I tell people the Baby Cyrus story, particularly Americans who all think we have the greatest country on earth, we're a free country, nothing bad ever happens here, the government is benevolent and all powerful and all caring, and all police officers are good, and CPS is an institution that only exists to protect children from abusive parents. And that's what we all believe. We all believe all that stuff. You have to believe it because you watch Hollywood, because you watch the movies, because you went to government school and you've been indoctrinated, and so we all have to believe the same thing. And that is basically what our culture all believes. And so if I tell the story of Baby Cyrus, even though the story that I tell is substantiated with video, because all of it has been filmed and all the evidence that I share is documented. Here's the film, here's the documentation. People still don't believe it. And if you say, well, just watch this video. No, I don't want to watch it, because they know that it's true and they don't want to have to be to learn. Ignorance is bliss. And the Bible talks about this, they willingly are ignorant of. People are willingly ignorant because it's like, I don't want to know. I don't want to see, I don't want to hear, because if I do, then I know I have to do something about it, and I don't want that responsibility of having to do something about it. Mm-hmm. So if I just share with you what happened to Baby Cyrus, people are like, nah, that can't be right. Probably the parents were abusing the kids. Probably they were drug addicts. Probably or something. And they just want to believe that. So before I can share the story, let me really quickly back up and in a few short moments just kind of describe what people don't know about CPS, because I was part of that group. Like I mentioned earlier, I was a pastor for nearly 10 years in Central California in an inner city church. So inner city church, we deal, with kind of the worst of the worst, with people who have no parents, with parents who are abusive, with parents who are drug addicts, with people who are former drug addicts, with the gangbangers and the prostitutes. I mean, those are the people who come to these inner city churches. And so that's what I was connected to, and that's the type of ministry I was in. So that being said, I had interaction with CPS on several occasions. I had interaction where I had to call CPS and call them on people where I knew in a particular home there was child abuse going on. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that I personally have put, with several phone calls, several men in jail that are in jail to this day. They are serving their prison sentences, and they deserve to be serving their prison sentences because they were abusive to children. Now, I don't think there's anybody listening to this program right now who does not agree that people who are abusing children need to be put in prison or need to face the consequences of doing so. We all agree with that. There's nobody whatever side of the aisle you're on who are like, yeah, if parents are abusing their kids, they ought to keep those kids. Nobody believes that. I don't believe that. You guys don't believe that. Nobody believes that. We want children to be safe, and we don't want those children being abused. However, what happens when you change the definition of abuse, and what happens when you change the incentive for people to take children in whatever they deem to be abusive? Because to you and me, I think abuse means physically assaulting somebody and physically harming somebody, whether it's, punching them, kicking them, or sexually assaulting them. That's abuse. But to the government, abuse is you pray. To the government, abuse is you homeschool. To the government, abuse is your children do chores. And these are the excuses they're using in order to take children away. And there's a reason why they're doing it, and it is because they have been given a financial incentive to do so since 1997. This was something I was completely unaware of. As a homeschooling family, we were aware of the fact that CPS often goes beyond their stated purpose, and they overreach, and they have become a threat to homeschooling families. So we've been aware of that for a long time. However, I did not know, even though I was aware of that limited amount, that, hey, we got to be careful for CPS because, they target homeschooling families. It's way beyond that. And I was totally clueless. You mentioned the term that I've been using over and over again, and being sued for using that term, by the way, which is government sponsored, or I like to say government subsidized child trafficking. And it is exactly that. So let me define that, and then I'll describe exactly how it is that way based on the incentive that I mentioned earlier. So what is child trafficking? Well, child trafficking is kidnapping for profit. What is kidnapping? Kidnapping is simply taking a child away from its family by force. That's kidnapping. Nobody disagrees with that. Well, if you kidnap somebody, and kidnapping, by the way, doesn't have to just be a child. Kidnapping can be an adult. And in fact, the Bible uses the term man stealing, and man stealing is how we did slavery in America, by the way. And so we stole men. It's man stealing. And God in Exodus 21:16 already judged this, and he judged it as a capital crime. The word of God simply states very plainly that anybody who kidnaps somebody else is worthy of death, whether the person they kidnapped remain in their custody or be sold off to somebody else. It doesn't matter. If you kidnap somebody, you are worthy of death. So that's God's judgment, just so everybody knows. That's the standard God has given us. Our standard in America is if you kidnap somebody, you deserve to kidnap more people, and you should get a monetary award for it. That's what we're doing here in America. So how does this work? In 1997, Bill and Hillary Clinton got passed, and I said it that way on purpose, the ASFA Act, the Adoptive Safe Families Act. Look it up yourself. Look it up on the internet. You can go on Wikipedia. You can go on the government website, download the act yourself, and actually read it. I've read the entire thing. It is horrific. If you are a human being, whether you have children or not, and you read this, you have no other conclusion that it was written by the devil himself. It is absolutely disgusting. Chief amongst this law, which they got passed again in 1997, is the fact that if they can keep a child out of your custody for 15 months, you immediately lose parental rights over your own children, meaning your child is no longer yours and it is now property of the government forever, permanently. And once they keep that child for 15 months, they can sell your child off, which we call adoption. And think about what adoption should really be. Adoption should be, I can't take care of my kids, so I sign the rights of my kid over to you. But today is, I can't take care of my kids, so you have to buy my kid from me for $30,000 and pay the major chunk of that to other bureaucratic agencies and the government. They're the ones who get that money. Don't tell me there's anything godly or wonderful or child welfare interested when this is a multi-billion-dollar industry just on the adoption side, let alone the kidnapping side. So here's how this works. The federal government in 1997, when they passed that law, which was championed by Hillary Clinton and signed into law by Bill Clinton, literally steals money from the Social Security Fund, Title IV of Social Security, and gives that money to each of the 50 states in order to fund kidnap. And it is funding kidnap. That money is given over to each of these agencies in all 50 states, and all 50 states have created their own individual laws in order to be able to receive this money that they get from the federal government. Florida is no exception. We have it going on here as well. In fact, Florida has a worse situation going on because of the way they set it up here, but we won't get into those details because it doesn't matter right now. The bottom line is this. According to the ASFA law, there are multiple payments that every state is going to make for every single child that they kidnap. They first get paid at the moment the child is kidnapped by police, because there's always police who are the ones kidnapping the children at the point of a gun. literally. And there's plenty of video to demonstrate that as well, not just in Baby Cyrus's case, but in every single case that happens nationwide. Then they take that child and transfer it from police custody to foster care. Once that child is transferred from police custody to foster care, a second payment is made. So the state's now getting paid a second time. That child is then in foster care, and that child is kept in foster care for months and months and months and months. Of course, obviously, they want to get to 15 months is their big goal. Typically, it's a parent who does get their child back doesn't get them back any earlier than usually about 8 months. And if they go 15 months, then after 15 months, they lose all parental rights. And if a parent gets their child back after 15 months, guess how they have to do it? They have to adopt their own child back, meaning they have to buy their own child back from the government. And yes, this happens all the time in America, just so you know. It never will make the news. Nobody will know about it. And because shame is involved, people don't talk about it. They don't want to talk about the entire process. Like we're out here telling people about it. There's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and they're very well incentivized to keep people's mouths shut. In fact, since the Baby Cyrus case is one of the first cases to go nationwide, and any other time in history where somebody has, in the last 20 plus years, exposed the system, every last one of them has been murdered. They've all been killed. And this is not an exaggeration. I'm not kidding. Just like anybody close to the Clintons just mysteriously dies, whether you're Jeffrey Epstein or you're just some person who used to know the Clintons and has some dirt on them, you mysteriously disappear, mysteriously commit suicide, or you just end up with 2 bullets in your back. This is all chronicled. Nothing I'm saying here is just paranoia. This is just pure chronicled factual evidence that we can give you all of the links and the details for those who are interested. The first one to look up is Senator Nancy Schaefer from Georgia. She was a senator from Georgia who began to expose this entire process, and she went around the country giving a speech that you can look up. Her speech on the internet today is called The Corrupt Business of Child Protective Services. And she was shot and murdered. Her and her husband were shot to death in their home because she was exposing this. This is how serious this is, people. We're not messing around. This is very serious business. Now, every single month, the state gets paid. Most people understand that a foster care parent is going to be paid every month for every child that they have in their care for foster services. What people don't know is that the amount of money that parent is being paid, the foster care parent, is typically about 10% of what the state is getting paid that same month for administrative fees. So by way of example, if you're a foster care parent and you have a child and you're getting paid $500 a month for that child, then the state is getting about $5,000 a month for that same child for it being in your care.
Wow.
So think how much money this adds up to every single month after month after month. They get paid when it's taken. They get paid when it's transferred to foster care. They get paid every single month. And during the process, that child, if anyone's here been in foster care, that child is taken to so many different programs and services. They have to go for psychological evaluation, medical evaluations. They're going to doctors. They're going to the hospital. They're put into usually special programs in public school. When they get put in those programs in public school, the school then can apply for Title IV funds, and they're getting thousands of dollars being in the school for that reason. The parents who, if they're trying to fight to get their kids back, have to pay to get all different types of programs they have to go through, from parenting programs to conflict resolution programs to, social services programs to teach you and to groom you how to be a better citizen in America, et cetera. And they have to pay for all these things out of pocket. The state can then put your child immediately on Medicaid, and then they can just use your child like a debit card, scan their barcode, and start ordering tests, start ordering equipment, start ordering everything they want. And when you add it all up, and I can't do the numbers. I've just had people who have been studying this for 10 plus 20 years who tell us, and there's whistleblowers who are telling us how much money is involved, that the estimates range between $1 to $3 million is how much every single child is worth to a state government.
Wow.
And that's everybody involved. And who's getting that $1 to $3 million? Well, guess who it is? Police agencies are getting it. So sheriff's departments, police departments, they're all getting paid for this. Judges are all getting paid for this as well. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole that if you went down it, you would never trust the American legal system ever again in your entire life. particularly when it comes to children. Who else is getting paid? Doctors are getting paid, hospitals are getting paid, and politicians are getting paid because all these other agencies are funding their campaigns. The hospitals are funding their campaigns. The doctors are funding their campaigns. The lobbying organizations, institutions are funding their campaigns. Big Pharma is getting paid because as soon as they take your kid, what do they load them up with? Drugs, all these pharmaceuticals. Everybody is getting paid, and it's up to $1 to $3 million of all the most powerful entities in America are all out to do what? To steal and to kidnap your children because they get paid an outrageous sum of money. Now, how much money is it? Again, we don't know the exact numbers because anybody who gets close enough to determine those numbers gets killed. However, the whistleblowers who've come out to share whatever information they've been able to compile, give us an estimate of between 60 to 80 billion dollars. So this is a 60 to 80 billion dollar industry. This is how much money's been transferred from Social Security to the individual states to kidnap your children. They are incentivized to kidnap your children. Now, many whistleblowers have stated on the record and in the books that they've published, and you can buy these books on Amazon or anywhere you want. An excellent one is one called Legally Kidnapped. And I definitely encourage people to look that up. And it's written by Carlos. Oh, I forgot his last name all of a sudden, but it's called Legally Kidnapped. And the fellow who wrote that is a former employee of CPS. He came out and blew the whistle and he had to just leave. And if you talk to anybody who has left, they will tell you that anybody with a soul or a conscience can never last more than 1 to 2 years working for CPS because it's so demonic, so horrific that you just can't go any much longer than that. And most people are gone in months. And it's a fact that they have a high turnover rate. Well, if this is a 60 to 80 billion dollar a year industry, the example I used there at the Torchbearer meeting last week was I used to be a pastor, and I could tell you in the inner city that I have kids who've come to us and they are repenting over their past sins, and they're repenting over being over gangsters and whatnot. And I hear the stories of the things that they had done. And anybody who's worked with kids in the inner city or coming from the streets, they'll tell you that kids will conspire. Two children, a kid who's 13, another one's 15. They will conspire one with another to murder another teenager just to steal his $100 pair of Air Jordans, which is a pair of expensive shoes that kids think are cool on the streets. So if two children will conspire to hide that information from everybody, and they will go to the grave not telling anybody about it, for $100, they will murder somebody and conspire to conceal the information. What do you think people are willing to do who have the highest levels of power and 60 to 80 billion dollars and their power is on the line? It's limitless what they would be willing to do. So it's not until you understand that cops are getting paid, judges are getting paid, doctors are getting paid, hospitals are getting paid, all these bureaucrats are getting paid, all these people are getting paid to kidnap your child. It's not until you understand that you will understand, oh, now it makes sense why they did what they did to Baby Cyrus. And here's the saddest part. The saddest part is the story of Baby Cyrus is horrific and it's terrible and it's egregious. However, it is nowhere near the most egregious case. It is nowhere near as sick and disgusting as what has happened to other children. That it's when you see that Baby Cyrus is just one case amongst millions, not thousands, but amongst millions. And his case wasn't even the worst. It was just the most public in the last 20 years or so. And that's all it was. We made it a public case, and that is how we got Baby Cyrus back. But most people aren't able to make it a public case, and their stories are even more egregious. In fact, we had a rally after Baby Cyrus was kidnapped that we called the PACT rally, P-A-C-T, the People Against Child Trafficking. And we had a guest speaker who came from the state of Oregon and who told his story about how CPS came and kidnapped his children. They were two children he had adopted, and they were homeschooling their children. So they took the children away that he had adopted. And the excuse they gave for taking those children away was that they had to do chores. No kidding. No joke. This is all documented. These children were made to do chores. Therefore, that's terrible. So you're a bad parent. Take your kids away. And they did everything possible to fight the system. He spent over $200,000 himself to fight back against the system. 15 months came and went, and he lost parental rights over his children forever. He has not seen his kids in 6 years. And guess what? To this day, even though he's lost parental rights, during the time they took those children, and to this day, he's forced by the state of Oregon to pay child support payments to Child Protective Services. Imagine having your kids kidnapped and taken from you, and then the government will suck the money out of your pocket to add additional funds to their coffers in order to just take more money from you. And this happens in California, Oregon, and Washington at a minimum. I don't know about the other 47 states, but I know for a fact those 3 states allow CPS to garnish your wages and steal money from you as a parent in order to continue to fund their CPS child kidnapping apparatus. And what we know, what I was mentioning earlier, of these 50 states, most of these states cannot even close their own annual budgets without this money. Meaning, your state, including Florida, probably, I don't know because I haven't done the analysis here, but most states, or at least many states, cannot even pay their own bills unless they kidnap enough children every single year.
Wow.
So we've always talked about the black market and how the black market, if it went under, we would all go under. And people don't realize how big that black market or the gray market is.
So the thing is when most people think of the term child trafficking, they think of the black market. They think of the movie Taken with Liam Neeson. They think of, children being shipped by the cartel across the borders in boxes and being sold off to some French billionaire or to Epstein Island or something like that. And I'm not saying that market doesn't exist. It does exist, and that's very real. However, in terms of a comparison to what we're talking about with CPS, it is a drop in the bucket. And I don't mean to minimize it because it is horrible and horrifying. And I'm not minimizing at all in terms of the horror of it or the severity or gravity of it. But in terms of the quantity of it, there is zero comparison whatsoever. There is nothing like what we're describing here in America because no other government that we're aware of subsidizes at the federal level child trafficking from the federal government to their state governments around the world. This is a uniquely American phenomenon. Only America is wicked enough for the federal government to steal your tax dollars and to incentivize the states to kidnap every single child they can get their hands on.
So you're literally saying they are the biggest culprit of the children trafficking happening.
The United States federal government is the largest child trafficking organization in the history of planet Earth, but they are funding the institution we call CPS that itself is not monolithic, meaning CPS is an institution that we are all aware of called CPS, Child Protective Services, that is different in all 50 states. It goes by different names. Here in Florida, I believe it's called DCF. In Idaho, it's called the IDHW, the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, and CPS is a division underneath it. But the bottom line is it's the same concept. It's the same institution that has all of its own local groups. Here in Florida, it's a disaster because we've separated into 17 separate nonprofit groups that are private institutions that the government then funds them. So we have an additional level of privacy and bureaucracy that's impossible to break through to get any transparency. And then they're more highly incentivized. So, because it's private, so there's no transparency on the government level, even if you tried. So yes, I am stating that wholeheartedly. This is the greatest, most wicked and abominable child trafficking institution in the history of the world. It is the United States federal government. And if anybody thinks that CPS, no matter what name it takes, is an institution that only exists in order to protect children from abusive parents, then you have bought probably the second greatest lie in American history. The first greatest lie being that a child in a mother's womb is a clump of cells. That is probably the greatest lie. The second greatest one is that CPS exists to protect children from abusive parents, because statistics and history both demonstrate that CPS exists in order to fund child trafficking. And CPS's own numbers, I believe I showed the actual report from CPS.
Yep.
They admit, and that was at the meeting last week, they admit that 83% of the time, children, when they're taken from their parents, it is for unsubstantiated charges, meaning there was absolutely no reason whatsoever to take that child. So it's purely a lie. The other 17% of the time, there's something there to be investigated. There was something there that actually happened. Maybe a child has a bruise. Maybe a child has a broken bone. Maybe a child was sick, and there's something there to be investigated. And CPS then justifies taking the child. But just because CPS justified it, it doesn't mean that it was actually a legitimate case of child abuse. It was just that CPS had something to justify it with. Now, if you know anything about government agencies, you know that the government never is transparent 100%. They are always going to put out their reports that favor them.
Yep.
Meaning that 83% number is probably more like 99%. The amount of parents who are actually abusing their own children is so minuscule, so small, it's unbelievable. Does it happen? Yes. And every time it happens, it is not just a tragedy, it's a travesty. However, as a statistical matter, it is almost irrelevant how rarely it actually happens. And I would say this, we had a methodology back in the day for dealing with child abuse. This is how simple it was. Hey, these parents or this parent is abusing the child. The police go in, they take the child, they give the child to grandma, and they walk away and say, have a good day. It's that simple. Nobody gets paid. Nobody's incentivized. The police are just doing their job, protecting innocent citizens, and the police now don't have to be horrible members of society who are now violating people's rights and participating in child trafficking. In fact, if you want to talk about God's law, every single police officer who forcibly takes a child away from their parent deserves capital punishment according to God's law. I know people don't like that, but that is what God said. And in the past, it used to be those police officers were saving children. Now those police officers are destroying families and in many cases, putting children into sex trafficking, because this is also an admission on CPS's part. The greatest vehicle for child sex trafficking in America is foster care. They admit it. They know it. Meaning the greatest number of women and children who end up in child sex trafficking got there through CPS and foster care. That's how they end up there. So anybody who believes that CPS is some benevolent agency saving children has bought the second greatest lie in American history.
Diego, you talked to us on that line about foster care, some of the requirements that you needed to have or that you didn't need to have in order to be a foster parent. Can you just touch on that? Because I think people need to understand. They understand, but now they really need to understand.
So the most egregious one, and understand this, I am not attacking anybody who's a foster care parent who you joined because you thought you were helping children. However, I would challenge you to reconsider the system that you're involved in and whether or not you're actually being of any help or not. Because, for example, one of the things you have to take note of, which what you're referring to, that we learned about, is that you can be a registered sex offender and still qualify to become a foster care parent. In most states, the only requirement is that you have not been caught molesting or raping a child in the last 5 years. As long as you haven't been caught doing so in 5 years, even though you are a registered sex offender, meaning the police went into your neighborhood and passed out flyers to all of your neighbors saying that a registered sex offender lives here, and you are on a national database with your address being made public so everybody knows a registered sex offender lives here. Well, that registered sex offender in many cases now are foster care parents getting children who were taken from you, from Christian parents, from godly people. Historically, and this is a very sad truth, but I have to mention this because it's just a statistical reality. Historically, it was minority, and I use the word, I'm doing that in air quotes for those who are just listening because I don't really like that term minority, but people understand what it means. It typically means black people and brown people, right? So minority families and minority parents were targeted. More black children and brown children were taken from their parents and put into this system than anybody otherwise. And the reason for that was simple. It's because they were the easiest ones to target. They had the least amount of resources to fight back. Well, now the system is so ominous, it doesn't matter if you're a multimillionaire, you can't fight back. If you don't have a platform and you don't have a big megaphone, you can't fight back no matter how wealthy you are. And we've chronicled this many times, wealthy people who had their children taken from them. They spent not hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars fighting to get their kids back and never got them back. And then they lose everything in the process of doing so because of the emotional, logistical, financial, and spiritual, devastation you go through having your child kidnapped and taken away from you. So it doesn't matter anymore because the system is too big and ominous. Therefore, they have now moved from just targeting minority families to now they're targeting conservatives, Christians, homeschoolers, etc.
Yeah.
And if that sounds shocking to you, then let me ask you, who did the IRS target while Trump was president? So yes, the government targets those of us who are in opposition to them. And there is no greater and easier way to destroy somebody than to kidnap their children. It is the greatest form of devastation you will ever experience. And people who have had their children taken from you, because I know I've interviewed and talked to many of them, will tell you that it is a fate. And I will, again, quote them. It is a fate worse than death.
Yep.
They say, because if my child died, then at least there would have been closure. But now I know my child is out there somewhere being raised by somebody else who is not me, and I'll never see them ever again. I would rather they died than to live this fate.
I felt the same way about my kids, because it's not about them living or dying. It really is about them hurting versus not hurting.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, if you're going to hurt my kid, I'd rather you just slash their throat and be done with it, so I don't have to worry about them hurting anymore. No.
And suffering.
I can't. It's so hard. Like, you break through the matrix. Like, we knew this stuff was going on, but Diego, the degree that it goes on, the paradigm breaks. People talk about us when we do these episodes or we do different things in these shows, and they say, it really looks like, that hits home with you. And it's like, well, because it does. This isn't fake.
Yeah.
What you're doing isn't fake. So, like, for whoever watches this or listens to this, we don't make this stuff up. These are real battles spiritually against evil. And there are the remnant that God has put together, people like Diego, ourselves, and many others like Todd, who was on with this podcast before, that have chosen to fight these battles. So when you see us emotionally respond, that's real.
Well, that's the reason why we started everything that we have. It's
Absolutely
like,
right.
We don't protect the children. Who are going to protect them?
Yeah.
We the people, we the parents need to come together and say, no, you've now really crossed the line, because they can't come after all of us. You, Diego, you need people like us to support what it is that you're saying with Baby Cyrus and getting out there and talking about that.
100%.
Yeah, and you need lots of us to come and undergird and support that.
Absolutely.